Michael is asking you two the similarities in public statements between Molotov and today's Lavrov on their neighbors, such as Finland, Poland, and Ukraine. Well, Ukraine was the Soviet neighbor, but...
Okay.
I think I saw that question. I mean, he's referencing how Molotov says that the Soviet Union has invaded Poland because Poland has ceased to exist, and they needed to invade to save Russians from oppression or something like that, which is more or less identical to what Lavrov and Putin are saying about Ukraine. And I think his question was also towards if this is a authoritarian thing or a Russian thing that has kind of created that similarity and that tradition. And some historians have made a link between the Tsar era and their disinformation, modern Soviet Union and Russian disinformation. But that argument is often based on how Gregory Potyomkin built fake model villages in Crimea to impress Russian leader Catherine the Great when she came to visit in 1783. That's, by the way, where the word Potemkin villages, meaning huge government projects that are meaningless and unfinished and were only constructed for propaganda purposes, comes from.
I had no idea. I really had no idea about it. No, I had no idea. Wow, thanks.
Pretty cool story, but there's actually a problem with that, Indy, now that you say that. Because here's the thing, right? A, that's probably an apocryphal story. B, disinformation has been around all over the place since as long as we have records. And C, Soviet disinformation was a beast all to itself as well. You know that, Indy, and I know that.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Really, you don't? No, of course not. How could you? But I mean, we still suffer from it. I mean, you know, movies have been made about how the CIA killed JFK, right? Kennedy.
Yeah.
But that is a documented disinformation campaign started by the KGB, spread by the KGB, and inserted into Western mythology to the point that we can't get rid of it. I mean, it's been 60, almost 70 years now.
And we know that the truth 65. Was that it was my uncle,
of course,
Lee Nidell, who is actually Lee Harvey Oswald, who... this is a story for another day, or else later on. But I mean,
I'll just say this much. I'll just break in with this much. Yeah. Lee Harvey Oswald is Indy's uncle. Mind my words.
Not was.
Is
still alive.
We'll tell you the story. We'll tell you a story some other day. But anyway,
really good story though.
It's a great story. But after World War II, Stalin apparently even gave these deliberate efforts the name desinformatia. And true to the word itself, and with a heavy dose of irony, I think it was a 1952 edition of the Great Soviet Encyclopedia, they defined it as meaning, and I'm quoting from my mind here now, so I don't have it, but basically meaning dissemination in the press and in media of false reports that are meant to mislead public opinion. And that entry then goes on to suggest that the main victim in the world at the time of such efforts was the Soviet Union, because it was mainly Western countries that used that kind of tactic. I mean, but of course that was all part of the disinformation campaign in itself.
But you got to realize, every authoritarian regime, the number one thing you've got to remember is they're always the victim. You're always the victim. You're always
that's the whole gaslighting and whatnot. We've talked about that in our episodes, and we'll probably get back to it again. But in any case, the tradition of a constant barrage of lies, deny everything and distort everything you can sort of policy, it goes back to early Stalinist times, not Tsarist times, but really early Stalinist times. And it stayed a Soviet tradition until the very end in 1991. And we should all remember that the boys in the Kremlin in 2022, Putin, Lavrov, all of them were Soviet-trained agents and politicians. And Putin has quoted his KGB training as including instructions on how to act if he would be caught, or if they would be caught, in the act of murder. And according to Vladimir himself, what they were told to do, even if they would be caught in the middle of the day, in the middle of West Berlin, with a gun in their hand and the corpse at their feet, even if people had seen them pull the shot, was to deny everything, lie and lie again.
Okay.
That was the method they used.
Okay, I got to stop you for a second, because you just reminded me of an episode from my own life. Apparently, I learned something from the Soviet Union. I didn't realize that. But this I'm casting my mind back to, this would be like 1984. So I'm still in high school. I'm like 16 or 17 years old. And I had my mom's car, and I'd gone to a movie with a couple of friends. And I was backing out. It was the Meyerland movie theater, for anybody from Houston. You know where Meyerland is. It was where Meyerland Plaza was, the movie theater right there. And I'm backing out. I don't remember the movie. I'm backing out of the parking lot, and another car was sort of backing up, and I backed into them. Not very hard, just a ding like that. And I'll stop, and I get out. And they also were teenagers. They were also like, 16, 17, 18 years old. And there was no damage to the car or anything, but being a good citizen, I gave him my phone number and said, okay, well, go. And my dad got a phone call like a few days later. The great thing about the end of this story is there's such a big hole in it that Dad never noticed. My dad got a phone call a few days later from somebody saying that their car, that was like $1,500 worth of damage, and the paint and they could, and Dad's like, did you back into somebody's car? And I said, no. And he's like, no, son, I mean, these things happen, but it's a lot of money and stuff. I'm like, no, I don't know what they're talking about. See, the thing he did not ask was, how do they have your phone number? He never, ever asked that. But he was like, son, listen, son, are you sure? I'm like, Dad, I don't know what they're talking about. And the next day he's like, well, just so you know, an insurance adjuster is coming over here, and he's going to take a paint sample from the back of your mom's car, and he's going to match it to their car. So if we hit their car, they're gonna know that you hit their car. Son, I just, I understand. You don't want but did you hit their car? And I said, no, I didn't. I told you that I didn't hit their car. And the paint guy came over and checked out our car, and the paint did not match. And I got an apology from my dad saying, son, I'm such a jerk. I asked you for the truth. You told me the truth, and I didn't believe you, and I'm really sorry. Sorry. And I'm like, oh, Dad, it's okay. I probably would, being magnanimous, probably would have done the same. All I can think is maybe they had a hit and run or a wreck of some kind, and since they had my phone, I don't know. I can't think of what could possibly have let me get away with this. But if it worked for me and my dad, boy, I'm painting myself to be a sterling character here. If it worked for me like that, then I can totally see why they used it in the Soviet Union. Because if it'll work on a car wreck, it wasn't even a wreck, then it'll work on anything, right?
Yeah, it does. And the whole repetition of lies and repeating it over and over again is, of course, part of the playbook, not just by the communists, but also by the Nazis. They follow the same. And we've made a lot of content about this that you can look up. But in any case, to get back to the question and to answer it in a more concise way, no, it's not a coincidence that Molotov and Lavrov sound the same, but it's not a Russian tradition per se. It's a Soviet tradition. And I think Indy intimated it earlier here that authoritarian regimes tend to lie more than democratic regimes. But I'd say that the onslaught of fake news in recent years, even if a lot of it does come from Russian troll farms, shows us that democracies are not impervious to these tactics. It's just a lot harder to get away with it when there's a free press, which is why we need a free press, obviously.